Okay, thank you for having me here today. And thank you for the introduction. I'm Travis. I'm with the St. Mary Irrigation District. And I was fortunate enough to be the project manager for this project, which was a massive leap forward for the St. Mary Irrigation District in terms of dealing with liabilities and infrastructure renewal. So the story of the Sauder chute, this is a familiar story to any of the infrastructure owners and managers here in the room with us. This is a project, only one of many examples in the southern Alberta region where the legacy infrastructure is being tested against the passage of time, the pressures of a changing climate, the changing operating expectations as our industry advances, and of course the requirements to uphold public safety. The Sauder Reservoir is located in the eastern third of the St. Mary River Irrigation District, in the top right of your screen, circled in red. On the left side of your screen is Lethbridge, and then on the right is Medicine Hat. The reservoir is located 235 kilometers along the main canal, which is represented by the blue squiggly line making its way across the photo. And the general boundaries of the irrigation district is the Oldman or South Saskatchewan River to the north. The original reservoir and the main dam and all of its ancillary components were constructed by the Pierre Ferré in the early 1950s. The original dam impounded water in the then Rattlesnake Coulee, making up a total live storage volume of 7,500 acre-feet. With that minimal storage volume, it really wasn't a storage reservoir, it was more of a flow-through reservoir. In 1982, circled in green, after the construction of the east and the west embankments and the raising of the water level, an additional 30,000 acre-feet of storage was gained through this expansion. Downstream of the Sauder Reservoir, 70,000 acre-feet or acres of irrigation takes place in the area south and west of Medicine Hat. The 1982 reservoir enlargement left virtually all components of the original main dam as was, untouched, with the exception of the irrigation outlet, located right here if you can see my cursor. No. The irrigation outlet was replaced as it was an original CSP structure, and it was designed to handle a flow volume of 25 cubic meters per second. As an engineer, I always find it impressive to look back into the historical records to see what the Pierre Ferré at the time, their engineers and their builders were able to accomplish with the equipment available to them at the time. In the top right photo, you can see a single axle truck placing large riprap that makes up the erosion protection on the embankment. And then in the center of your photo, the center photo is a drag line being used to construct your cutoff curtains. And in the bottom right, circled in red, you can see the issues with overland drainage that took place during construction of this dam site, where some erosion and head cutting had occurred. So in this case, the Pierre Ferré, they were able to build a 28-meter tall dam virtually out of nothing, and that included all of the ancillary works, all in a matter of 2 years. The original chute structure was constructed in 1953. It consisted of an ungated, 80-meter-long cast-in-place structure. There was a single contraction joint, 40 meters downslope. The original thickness of the slab was only 6 inches thick, which doesn't meet current design standards. A drainage collection system collected groundwater from underneath the slab and it ran the entire length down the center of the chute. The energy dissipation system of the chute was a flip bucket that discharged water into a plunge pool that needed considerable maintenance over the years. The structure, being 70 years old, was clearly starting to show its age. Despite multiple attempts at maintenance over the years, it was still ultimately in a deteriorating condition. In the early 2000s, an overshot gate structure was installed, funded by Irrigation Rehabilitation, which replaced a fuse plug that had failed and breached several times over the project's history intentionally. But nonetheless, when that fuse plug did release, it would drain large volumes of water from the reservoir and release it to the river. The existing spillway was designed to a total capacity of 32 cubic meters per second. But based on the results of the 2014 Southern Regional Stormwater Plan, which suggested that we needed the ability to flow up to 75 cubic meters per second, which was more than double the original capacity of the spillway. The recent structure failures of others that have made the news has served as excellent motivation for us to better understand and begin to really address the liabilities that we have. And we still have liabilities. This structure shown here is our Chin chute. It's still in service. These pictures were taken after the first year of operation, where the bottom of the chute actually failed, large in part to the 6-inch thick slab. A chute failure such as this was always a very real concern at the Sauder spillway, and we were fortunate enough to not have to deal with this during a time in need. The main embankment had its own host of issues that were well documented throughout the historical dam safety reviews. The primary concerns related to the dam stability, its lack of instrumentation, and generally poorly controlled seepage originating through the dam. The original 1950s construction report provided us with this insight that explained a lot of the issues that we had. And the quote from the report is that the designed cross-section adopted for this structure was the minimum that may be permitted. So this design was adopted for reasons of economy and scarcity. The steep cross-section of the dam was 2-to-1, and at the base 2.5-to-1. The PFRA, they made a troubling inclusion to include clay tile drainage pipes in the drainage blanket of the embankment. This presented a fairly serious concern because failure of either one of these pipes could potentially result in a total failure of the dam structure. From an overland drainage perspective, the St. Mary main canal, represented as blue on this screen here, collects drainage from an area of 1,900 kilometers squared. So this is due to the fact that the canal was constructed as a contour canal that meandered its way across the landscape. And until the flood mitigation projects at Horsefly Spillway and the Chin Reservoir expansion are fully funded and completed, all drainage intercepted by the main canal that cannot be stored by our reservoirs is spilled through the Sauder chute to the South Saskatchewan River, which is our only discharge out of our irrigation works. The June 2010 rainfall event provided us with a reminder of the role in which our infrastructure acts as the primary conveyance for floodwaters. And in this video, we are spilling roughly 20 cubic meters per second, which is roughly 2/3 of the original design capacity, which was 32 cubic meters per second. As you can see, if we were expected to handle a flow rate of 75 cubic meters per second, the structure was going to exist as a pile of rubble at the base of the slope. 2018 was another event that brought the importance of overland drainage and the ability to handle it into perspective. And if you can believe it, 2 weeks after these photos were taken, we were running for the 2018 irrigation season. Roughly 40 excavators worked 24 hours a day for over a week. Their job was to clear ice jams at various choke points along our main canal. In total, we estimate that we either spilled or stored within our reservoirs about 50,000 acre-feet of overland drainage water. Funding for this project was submitted to the AIM program, the goals of which were flood mitigation, dam safety, structure modification, and overall improved reservoir operations. The submitted budget was $13 million, while on the dam safety side, to address the concerns that we had with the embankment, a stabilizing tow berm was submitted for funding to the irrigation rehabilitation program to the tune of $2.1 million. In fall 2020, we began the selection process for an engineering team. The emphasis was placed on relevant past project experience and knowledge of the regulatory requirements needed to deliver the project. The MPE team in Lethbridge was assigned the task, primarily based on their success delivering similar sized and similar types of structures. And because of the recent project experience, basically the week after the assignment, they were right on top of getting on all the regulatory approvals that were needed to keep this project on time. A request for contractor qualifications was tailored specific to our project. The request for qualifications was made adaptable. We recognized that the need for an elaborate paperwork-heavy proposal wouldn't necessarily separate the wheat from the chaff. Our weightings focused heavily on recently completed similar projects, while winter construction was a requirement, and about a half a dozen contractors made it through the qualification process. In June of 2021, the project was tendered and it was awarded to BYZ Enterprises of Medicine Hat, Alberta, who submitted a low bid at a value of $10.5 million. The next lowest bid was 10.8. And after approval of Water Act, work began. So the contractor began short thereafter with various site preparation and the beginnings of chute demolition. And in a span of 2 days, the original chute was gone. A troublesome bedrock seam midway up the slope required a bit of advanced effort, and the contractor was quick on addressing groundwater concerns, particularly in the basin of the structure at the toe of the slope. In early September, our first concrete pour, which was a cutoff wall, took place. And by mid-September, the drainage materials, all the formwork and the reinforcing was in place for the first major and largest concrete pour, which was the structure's stilling basin. So for the basin pour, due to the presence of an overhead power line and just the general size of the site, a Putzmeister conveyance system was brought in from Calgary to place the roughly 550 cubic meters of concrete. because the stilling basin would constantly be interacting with groundwater and be submerged. The concrete admixture Zypex was included in all the concrete that would be submerged by sulfate-rich groundwater to prevent the ingress of sulfate attack to the concrete. So with the basin pour out of the way, work progressed on the 5 remaining cutoff walls and the 5 remaining slabs. The 2021 fall weather was very much in our favor, and the contractors absolutely made the most out of it. The evening temperatures, for the most part, were above 0, and that meant that we could get away with insulated tarps and the addition of minimal heating. But this was still winter construction. The head wall slabs and head wall structure required a hoarding and heating structure. And by June 2022, all aspects of the project were complete, but this only represented one of 4 major elements of the entire project. The requirements to more than double the conveyance capacity of the spillway channel necessitated the need to replace an existing county bridge. And in this case, the bridge construction was subcontracted to Volker Steven Contracting out of Lethbridge. Here's some photos of the placement of the bridge decking. The removal of the bridge took place in October, and the new bridge was ready in time for traffic by Christmas 2021. So coming back to our shaky dam that we touched on earlier. So this slide, I will admit, is probably a bit hard to read, but it is right out of the design drawings for the tow berm that was designed to accommodate the improvements to the embankment. The key thing to note here is the 5 red lines that represent the troublesome tile drains that extended up to 18 meters into the drainage blanket of the embankment. Initially, there wasn't a whole lot of optimism at the beginning of the excavation work. The tow berm area, the ground conditions were exceptionally poor. But ultimately, things did work out in our favor, as underneath the decades of muck and vegetation, there was a competent foundation that we could work with. Once drainage was established, the work progressed. The tile pipes were excavated and they were located. The initial placement of fine filter materials took place. The new drainage collection system incorporated high-density polyethylene piping to collect the collected groundwater and drain the embankment. And these pictures show how the poly piping liners were inserted into the clay tile pipes. These photos are of the finished collection system prior to backfilling. And from there, the fine filter materials were placed. In the beginning lifts of the 60,000 cubic meter embankment began, and nearly all of this construction took place over a period of 2 months, and it was substantially completed in November of 2021. And the final topsoiling and seeding took place in the spring of 2022. This photo was taken during the final inspection in June of 2022. In January 2022, construction of the intake structure located immediately upstream of the new bridge and inside the reservoir began. And here you can see the placement of the drainage piping and the foundation footings. Here we have the wall reinforcement, the gate rub and sill plates. In-stream water control projects was awarded the contract to fabricate and install the 3 5-meter wide radial gates. And these gates, they were designed to accommodate ice loading. All fabrication of the gates and their components was subcontracted to D&D Machine Works located in Lethbridge. And here the engineering team is inspecting the epoxy coating on the radial gates. In spring 2022, the radial gates were hydro-tested for leaks and all passed. And the structure was put into service for the 2022 irrigation season. So the modernized spillway control works, they represent a massive improvement to the operations of the Sauder Reservoir. I think you guys can see the chart pretty well. Important things to note are the purple and the green lines, and the max water level, which is 65 centimeters above the full supply level of the reservoir. So in years prior, because of the limited capacity of the spillway, our operations would often have to start pre-spilling in anticipation of floods. So this could happen with a rainfall event, or in the case where a large swath of irrigation was turned off suddenly, say by a rain event or a long weekend coming up. So that pre-spilling would occur once you hit the elevation of 803.9, which is represented by the purple line. On this chart, the squiggly blue line represents the real-time readings of the water level of the reservoir. In this case, the 2022 irrigation season. In this instance, we experienced an event where a large area of irrigation turned off suddenly while the ordered irrigation water was in transit through our canal system. With the original control works, during such an event, we would have had to begin pre-spilling to the river once we hit that purple line at 803.9. With the modernized control works, we could rest assured that if needed to, we could spill the required capacities. And in this case, we were able to keep that water within the reservoir for reuse in the weeks following this event without it being spilled to the river. So coming back to the original budget items, the final cost for all aspects of the chute project, the bridge, the intake structure, as well as the gates and the spillway channel come in at $9.5 million, which was 27% under budget and most importantly on time. While the tow berm aspect of the project, originally budgeted for at $2.1 million, came in at 1.4, 33% under budget and on time. So that's about wrapping things up. Firstly, I want to say thank you to the entire engineering team at MPE for their efforts in pulling together this project in the manner that they did. In particular, I want to thank Jeff Wolich, Tim Guan, Tanner Phillips, Trevor Curtis, and Chris McRae, as well as the on-site residents, Craig Fuller and Cody Braun. And I'm only touching on a few members of the team that I worked with on a regular basis. I'm sure there's more. The team at BYZ was fantastic to work with, and that includes Matt Zamerchuk, Bruce Johnson, and James Hadnaggy. And their subs, Lawrence Bonnert with Volker was fantastic to work with as well. And then also I want to finally thank Trevor Hazel and Dennis at D&D Machine Shop for their contribution in the construction of the gates.